Well, it is 2024, which means that we get a new round of indie titles in Steam Next Fest. And this being the first Next Fest of the year, the February edition, I decided to play some of the top played games, the most played demos from Next Fest, as well as a couple that I was just really kind of looking forward to that I've heard of before. So let's go ahead and see what the indie scene has coming for us this year. Or I think they're all this year, maybe even next year. At least early demos. Let's see what the indie scene has coming for us on Steam. First up here, let's go over Dread Dawn. And Dread Dawn is the game I'll forever think of if the phrase, "we have Project Zomboid at home," is ever uttered in my presence, because that's just what it is. It is a bad Project Zomboid. It's not great in many ways. I wish I had played a game that was fun or interesting or unique, but it just wasn't it. And it's just not great in many ways. First off, I'm pretty sure I figured out how it was one of the most played demos for this February's Next Fest. When launching the game, two separate applications launched, one being the game proper that you play in, and the other is a small window in the background with a few small rendered cylinders in it, spinning in it. When the game is closed, that window stays open and the game subsequently stays being played. The game is still running in Steam. So aside from what I think is just them gaming the system, the game is just also not great overall. It's not great visually. They attempted a story, which was terrible, and the gameplay is bad as far as this type of isometric looking game goes. It's Project Zomboid at home, if it had a bad story, and was created with stuff that looks like AI. Seriously, many, if not all, of the posters and signs in the game reek that they had just used AI to create them. They didn't even change the images at all to put in text that made sense. It is just AI garbled nonsense. It is that nonsense babble you see, which is just a mix of random letters and designs thrown together on every poster and sign you see. Not to mention the assets are just all incorrectly sized, such as skateboards or dartboards. When you come across them, you come across them a lot as well. Dartboards are like the entire size of a wall. Makes zero sense. A story is attempted here. I'll give it that. I attempted an actual story. You're a student at a school, a very rundown and dilapidated school even prior to the zombie apocalypse. The military swoops in to protect the school and attempt to get people evacuated, but your sister decides to just run off on her fucking own for some reason, and of course you have to go look her, and then with your help from your friend who's literally called Fat Ass, that's his name, he pushes down an officer or a member of the military, and they just kind of chase him, and he somehow outruns them, and you guys just kind of hop over a fucking wall, and then you get into the actual game. It's not great. It's very similar to Project Zomboid. You're scavenging through corpses, lootable objects throughout the remnants of the city and surrounding area, grabbing food to keep your hunger and thirst down, scavenging weapons or various crafting materials, and you're attacking zombies with an assortment of melee weapons and other things. There's a charge attack. But it's also lacking kind of that immersive sim element that Project Zomboid had, where if you weren't cautious about your actions, where if you were hurriedly jumping through a window you just broke, you can get cut and you need to treat that. It's just not here. It's just very basic. Dread Dawn, and I cannot stress this enough, is just literally, we have Project Zomboid at home, and I felt like my time was wasted. Best of luck to the developers in the future. It does seem like it is a very small team, though the extra window that runs when you have the game running is kind of unsettling, and the use of just bad AI assets really just kind of throws it off. Now, not everything I played that I didn't really particularly enjoy was bad, to say. Backpack Battles was an interesting title. It's pretty much an auto battler, much like you have with auto chess or teamfight tactics or any of the numerous other titles in this genre, but with a different twist. You select a character, a hero, who has their own special abilities themselves, and they also have a special backpack, and this is where the backpack battling comes into effect. Before you begin your run and between each round of combat, you will purchase items from a store and you will move them around in your inventory space, rotating them to fit them as you can see fit, or buying more backpack space to use. From here, you either combine different items into more powerful items, or you use items and their special abilities with other items, such as a little pack that lets you reuse rocks over and over again to break your opponent's armor, or combining a spike and a shield, a horn and a shield to make a spiked shield for extra defense and thorns damage. It's a very interesting concept, and one that I can say is it works rather well. You're just going to get more healing out of this from your food items placed next to each other, your ingredients. It's just a really interesting take on an auto battler, to say the least. Now, I'm not really a fan of auto battlers, but Backpack Battles separates itself from the usual slog of the samey ones that you do see out there. You couldn't really get me to understand the difference between, say, like Auto Chess or Dotas or League of Legends Teamfight Tactics. They all look the same to me, whereas Backpack Battles is definitely different. It's completely unique. It's a lot faster than I think the other auto battlers are, and if you are a fan of this genre of game, I would definitely say that this is a demo worth checking out. Moving on, we have Gatekeeper. It is an isometric roguelike set in a science fiction universe. It was fun. It ran well. It worked great. It just wasn't exactly notable in many ways. The demo did allow you to play between two different characters who have different abilities, this being their basic attack, a special attack, a movement ability, and an ultimate ability. Each individual level is rather small, but you do move through them very quickly. You do have shrines or obelisks where you can find, which will provide an upgrade to an ability of yours or to a basic stat, such as damage or movement speed or health regeneration. Or the shrines or obelisks will be an objective to complete to move on to the next level. Every fourth level, I believe, will include a boss encounter that you need to complete to move on. One good thing I'll note is that the enemy abilities, notably on the larger boss encounters, are easy to see and dictate where you need to move. They are displayed in a way that you should be like, oh, I shouldn't stand here. Overall, Gatekeeper has a neat sci-fi aesthetic, but I do think that's the best part of it, at least to me. Otherwise, it's just kind of a middling experience. It's not bad. It's just not anything I'd go out of my way to purchase like some of the other titles on this list. If you are into top-down sort of Hades action kind of roguelikes, this might be one for you, based around choosing a hero to play as and their abilities rather than a weapon and other stuff you pick up along the way. Breachway is yet another deck-building roguelike coming out. This is a very popular genre, it seems, as it combines the aspects of puzzles, which in turn-based strategy and RPGs. The main distinguishing factor here is that Breachway revolves around you using a ship and piloting through a map, kind of akin in a fashion to how Faster Than Light managed it, from different node to different node with various branching paths, and each point having some sort of encounter, not always a combat encounter or a merchant or some sort of decision to make. Using a space journey via ship combat and managing its power distribution, which in turn changes the resources you have to each encounter. This way you'll know if I put more power here on my defenses, I can cast more defensive cards, or more offensive, or more, just other cards. You'll also have some crew members aboard your ship, which will have their own abilities that can be used, from providing extra resources to use to increasing damage or shielding damage penetration. The demo did showcase quite a few different types of ships. However, only 2 were able to pilot in the demo, one of which was the intro ship. Wouldn't recommend that one if you're doing the actual demo level. And these will affect different types of equipment you can have installed on your ship, such as missiles, shield types, stuff like that. Aesthetically, it does look really good. It's cartoonish and stylized in kind of like a Saturday morning cartoon type of way, and the sound design is good enough to help along with the sounds of the cards and, thus the abilities you're using. If you are a fan of deck building games and a fan of roguelikes, but want it set in kind of a pseudo Faster Than Light type game, Breachway might just be for you. Moving on, we have Millenia, which is a new forthcoming 4K strategy game set to take on likes of the genre giant Civilization. Well, they hope at least. It doesn't really set itself apart from Civilization in any meaningful way, down to a point where it's almost like a copied homework version, with a few enough changes. The gameplay is almost identical to that of the Civ series, which I understand, but that's just how it's got to be. But there's really only one major difference here. The tech tree is smaller and thus more streamlined, but that's also a double-edged sword. You're losing a lot of potential variety, and even if some of the choices were bad, the options for more variety are always good. But that's the trade-off here for a more streamlined version of a 4K strategy game. However, there is one major change, and that is to different kinds of ages you can advance to. You will have different objectives to meet to advance to special ages, such as defeating enough enemy units and settlements to advance to something like such as the Age of Blood. Now, the demo is only 60 turns, which is not a lot in the world of a 4K game, considering it's also at the start of the game, which means you're not really going to be progressing or doing an absolute ton. This will let you progress through 3 total ages, and the third ages being where you kind of have those unique twists. This isn't a very large genre. It's still rather niche, so it's good to see a small studio jump into this entrenched genre. But of course, it is published by Paradox Interactive, essentially the non-Sid Meier strategy game powerhouse. Millenia didn't differentiate itself enough for me to take a look at past the demo, unless I cop it on a sale. But for the hardcore fans of the 4K genre, based around, history, there might be enough here for you to enjoy, and kind of as like a tastebreaker to switch up what you're playing as occasionally. Now we just kind of move on to a treat that I discovered. It's a game that I didn't really know what to expect going in. I thought it was going to be rather dumb, and I was wrong. I'm speaking of Balatro. Balatro is yet another deck building roguelike, except you're playing poker. At its base, you're tasked with scoring an increasing amount of points each round, limited by an amount of hands you can have in play. Furthermore, you have a limited number of discards to draw new cards to utilize for your scoring hands. You're attempting to score points with how you would score in traditional poker to match up against your opponents. You're looking to get pairs, full houses, straights, 2-pair, so on and so forth. However, that's just at its base, and then it starts to really dive into the deck building. You can upgrade cards in your deck to have more than the traditional 52 card deck. You're going to be crafting your decks to specifically fish for different scoring hands. In my time playing the demo, I was fishing for 2 pairs, full houses, 4 of a kind, or 3 of a kind scoring hands. You're adding cards. You're giving different cards bonuses between rounds to increase scoring. To help with this, there are other cards you can pull from packs in between rounds that you purchase, the most transforming of which are Jokers. You can have up to 5 at any time, and they alter scoring in some pretty minor to drastic ways, such as when you score with an odd card, you get 4 extra points to your multiplier. Or scoring with an even card adds 30 coins to the scoring total of that card to be hit by the multiplier. Then you have your planet cards, or tarot cards, which further change things from altering cards permanently, such as changing their suit or providing bonuses to finishing a round with them still in your hand rather than scoring with them, or changing how points are scored for that round as a whole. Balatro is not a game that I thought I would enjoy as much as I did, yet I did. It's a very simple premise of being poker, but also much more. There are even boss rounds where the gameplay itself is completely altered, such as the black suits, that being the clubs or spades, no longer scoring any points, so you're looking to dump your hand of them at any chance you can get, or even where your cards being drawn after scoring with them, they're face down, forcing you to rely on a bit of luck in your scoring endeavors and understanding how the game stacks the cards in your hand. I really didn't understand why this of all the games was up there at the top of the most playlists when I chose it, but after playing it and getting hooked on the demo, I understood. It's simple and approachable and extremely fun as a deck builder, and as far as roguelikes go, it's going to be a quick game to jump into. It's definitely a title I'll look forward to having on my Steam Deck, and even one I dare say that I wouldn't mind having on my phone. We got to move on to a couple games that Dark and Darker kind of opened the floodgates up on. Dungeonborne is another new extraction game, taking definitely heavy influence from that initial success of Dark and Darker, minus the embroidered lawsuit going on with giant Korean publisher Nexon Games. It's definitely a familiar title, but it's also new in plenty of ways. It's slightly faster than Dark and Darker was, and it strays definitely away from sort of the similarities Dark and Darker was looking forward to having with Dungeons and Dragons, but also seems more complete in numerous ways than Dark and Darker. So naturally, it is a first-person dungeon crawl, where you can team up with up to 2 other friends for a party of 3, or go at it solo in either a static and constantly shrinking map filled with AI-controlled enemy mobs and other players to fight, or there's even arenas where you can just go in for like a team deathmatch style PvP. Overall, it's a nearly entirely identical gameplay loop to Dark and Darker, and thus things such as Escape from Tarkov. You gear up, go into the dungeon, collect loot, new gear, kill things, earn XP, then either extract via a portal or go deeper into the dungeon for harder enemies and better loot. One way it varies differently from Dark and Darker is that there is also an abundance of daily quests and stuff, or weekly quests and other types of tasks you can complete, more akin to Escape from Tarkov. Completing these will just give you gold and other rewards to help you out in the dungeons. This gold can then be used at the merchant to purchase better gear or consumables to help you with your next foray into the depths. Maybe it's just because Iron Mace opened the floodgates. We have a lot of these sort of fantasy medieval style extraction RPGs now, but they all seem to be just kind of slightly better than Dark and Darker was at its initial launch. So if you're not strictly tied to the Dungeons and Dragons line that Dark and Darker takes, take a look at Dungeonborne, because you can literally be a Death Knight, a skeleton wielding a 2-handed sword, or a Cryomancer, a skeleton wielding ice magic. Plus, the weapon itemization's a bit different. Magical staffs will just have different elements on it and thus different skills. It's a neat twist on what Dark and Darker was initially doing. Dungeonborne isn't without its issues, however, as it seems various classes are just sometimes at extreme disadvantages, even more so than in Dark and Darker. Some seem overly strong in most situations, and others are just kind of weak or not designed for even solo playing in the solo play queue. And gear itself can vary in strength, such as different types of magic staffs, but if the developer, Mithril Interactive, because this is their first foray into any sort of gaming, keeps at it, they can carve themselves a fine niche to hang out in this genre, as it is more approachable and than its more well-known counterpart Dark and Darker is. Next up, we have another dungeon crawling extraction RPG, Dungeon Stalkers, and holy hell was it an awful experience. It does have a couple changes, such as going to third person, and the benefit of this is clearly to show off those 3D female models and their imminent incoming microtransaction cosmetics. Your armor does have a durability, and that is shared across all the armors you might have for some reason, and once it's broken, well, your character just happens to lose clothing like an entire cape, revealing their spandex-clad ass. Definitely don't wonder why they did this. I understand. That's what they were going for. I played a few rounds, and one good change that they had to this game was they did have a co-op only version of the dungeons you can take your friends into, but that was also limited to just 3 runs per day. On top of that, the combat is not very good. The reticle is kind of nice. It does show you the direction your weapons are going to slash, but this is more of such a hero class based. Rather than classes, they are heroes. So the rogue is only the female, your archer is only the grizzled not snake dude. It is what it is. One of the things was I noticed that the weapons do not always connect where your reticle is, and if there's a slight movement, various enemies have odd attack animations or movement animations that render them near impossible to hit, especially with magic. Complete lack of defensive abilities for a few of the classes makes them pincushions and easy targets in the PvP aspect of the game. Dungeon Stalkers was just kind of an all-around bad experience, up there with my experience in Dread Dawn. I tried around with the standard PvE, PvP, and just the PvE with all the different stalkers or classes that I could. You can play as, and the only truly viable one all around was the Shield Wielder. That's who you ran into mostly online, and that's just who you should play as if you're going to play it. Otherwise, you're just going to be toast. So if you really want a poorly balanced, poor-feeling extraction looter RPG, but you want to be able to stare at a female model with her destroyed armor showing her near bare ass, well, this might be an extraction game for you. I'm gonna finish off my Next Fest experiences here with 2 games that I did really enjoy. NeverGrave is up next, and it was both very surprising and very fun. It's an interesting title. If you took the aesthetic of Hollow Knight, but put in some of the backbones of Dead Cells, such as finding new items and weapons upgrades and spells, and threw that over top of how Rogue Legacy has you rebuild a village for your upgrades, but then let you build it as you see fit like it's a survival game, customizing its locations and everything, but also allow 4-person co-op in your Metroidvania roguelike, well then you have NeverGrave. This amalgamation and mishmash of games works well together, and funnily enough, even though it's being developed apparently by the small studio Frontside 180, they are a part of the Pocket Pair developer. You know, the people behind the surprising smash hit Palworld. NeverGrave, The Witch and the Curse has you take on the role of a magical hat, which you can summon the body of a witch to control and play as, or take control of various other enemies to take of their skill set and HP bar. That's the really big twist here as the Metroidvania roguelike. You can take control of the bodies of enemies and use their abilities and skills. It's a fun and unique take on this genre, but most importantly, the controls are extremely responsive and the game feels great to play. The movement, attacking, dodging, skill usage, all of this is extremely important in a 2D side-scroller Metroidvania style game. I've seen some say that NeverGrave is just a Hollow Knight clone. Well, it's only kind of the art style and only kind of there. Other than that, everything would be a Hollow Knight clone if every Metroidvania's 2D side-scroller was one. And this is more akin to a roguelite. It's more akin to Dead Cells, and it's not even just a straight-up Dead Cells clone. There's a lot going on here. Most importantly, there is that 4-player co-op that's possible. However, that was not possible in the demo. And I did find this game when I was doing research for my podcast. We were talking something about Pocket Pair, and this was on their website, and I saw it was in Next Fest, and I had to play it. It plays as good as it looks. It is extremely fun, it is extremely neat. There's some unique concepts here tacked on to borrowing different ideas from other games in the Metroidvania and roguelike genres. So if you're a fan of Metroidvanias and roguelikes, definitely check out NeverGrave. Last up here from Next Fest this February, I have Pacific Drive, and this is a game that I've been looking forward to since its announcement, as it's just overall interesting to me. Unfortunately, the demo didn't provide much to us aside from the prologue and the very first mission, both of which just pretty much go over the basics of the game and set up what is exactly going on in the game. But from this alone, it definitely seems like it can be fun, and definitely it is going to be unique. Taking place in the Pacific Northwest, specifically in the Olympic Peninsula, this is a game where you are going to be babying your car to outrun and avoid paranormal events and enemies on your way to try and escape the exclusion zone, which you were sucked into. All this came about after science just decided to go too far in the name of progress, creating this just zone where reality phases in and out, and that the US government and president just denies exists at this point. In Pacific Drive, well, you drive your car. But it's a little bit more than that. You also need to take care of it. This means you need to keep it fueled appropriately. You need to keep all 4 tires inflated and undamaged. You need to keep it repaired and in driving condition. To manage this, there are points in time where you will hop out of your car to explore and scavenge locations on foot, filling up your inventory with junk items and tools that might be useful in keeping your car ever driving forward. It's an interesting gameplay loop where we are barely introduced to in the demo, but I can imagine how it will proceed as stakes become higher and there's more and more anomalies and hazards to avoid both on foot and in the car. On top of this, it's almost kind of immersive sim levels of driving. You have to manually shift your car by looking down at the gear shifter. You have to turn on and off the ignition if you want to reserve fuel. You have to control the windshield wipers and the headlights. All of this, I'm sure, will come into play when you are dealing with some of the more dangerous anomalies and trying to avoid different hazards, but that's not really here in the demo. On top of the simple, intriguing, and fun gameplay loop that I think it will have, Pacific Drive also just looks amazing. It's the second best looking game based on the Pacific Northwest out there, only being surpassed by Alan Wake 2 and its locations of Bright Falls and Cauldron Lake. I know that's a very short list of Alan Wake 2 and Pacific Drive, but that's what we have, these two. It's not a realistic looking game, but it's stylized just right and it looks great, and all of the lighting and effects are fantastic. It's absolutely gorgeous, and the visual effects in the exclusion zone are well done. I am greatly looking forward to this title when it launches in just under 2 weeks on February 22nd. Every time Steam, and I guess every time Valve and subsequently Steam puts on a Next Fest, it's always fun to dive through what new indie titles are coming up, whether they be great and coming out of nowhere, like Balatro Poker Roguelite, or two items that I figured I might like but really did enjoy, such as NeverGrave, that Metroidvania roguelike, and Pacific Drive, the immersive sim paranormal anomaly driving escape game, as well as a few other notable titles coming in that just might provide a nice twist into different genres, such as Backpack Battles being a great new addition in the Auto Battler arena. And of course, there's always duds. I do like to try plenty of the games that are in the top most played demos of Next Fest, and Dread Dawn, Dungeon Stalkers. Those are two that I don't know why they are there. I think people just happen to be like, oh, another extraction game. Let's play Dungeon Stalkers. Not good. And I said my piece on Dread Dawn. I think they just kind of snuck in a way to artificially increase the amount of play time that was going on there with that two simultaneously program running thing going on. Anyways, because of this, Balatro has been added to my radar. It was a blast to play for how simple it seems to be and all of the depth that actually lies within it. NeverGrave jumped onto my radar when I saw it was linked on Pocket Pair's website when I was doing research on their website, and Pacific Drive is just beautiful and fantastic. These are three games I do really think everybody should check out: Balatro, NeverGrave, and Pacific Drive. Anyways, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. Please give my channel a subscribe, and I will see you next time.